Welcome to the PI Podcast, Political Insights for the Palaging Inis. I'm your host, Matt, and with me is my co-host, political scientist, meme lord, and winner of our Noche Buena showcase. But please remember to claim it at Mother Ignacia, Quezon City, Borge.
Layo. Tingin. Pwede mo pala lang. Pa-ship na lang dito. Ilibre pa
Pa-ship
lang
na
ako.
lang.
Well, my father actually would bring home a turkey.
Oh, wow, a turkey.
Just Canadian things. Anyway, PI nyo,
Mhm.
PI nating lahat. Forge at your service.
But by the way, Borge, just for listeners, like, where are you now and how is the weather there?
I am currently in Canada. Almost froze my balls off the other day.
Oh, wow.
It's fine. It's just negative 30 plus
Mm.
dropping.
You're experiencing a real white Christmas, ang totoong Christmas na may
Second winter here in Canada, so it's all fine. It's all fine.
Yeah. Okay. But speaking of Christmas, though, and of course, everyone is saving and probably doing a lot of their shopping, like trying to buy presents, etc., making ends meet. They're talking about, of course, budgeting. And budgeting is a very, very salient political issue now, especially with a lot of public funds being discussed. Like, for example, the confidential fund of Sara Duterte, a huge amount of money being used for we don't know what, and this we should have a right to know about these things. And another hot topic issue with this administration is the Sovereign Wealth Fund, also known as the Maharlika Wealth Fund. So, and everyone's wondering, like, why are you touching this money? And of course, because this is the Marcos administration, people are raising their eyebrows, to say the least. But what can you say, Borge, about these fund-related issues? Because kaya nga ang title natin ngayon ay More Funds in the Philippines. Ano yan, Borge?
Oh, yeah. Regarding the public wealth, this is one of the more underestimated sticking points in democratic or democratizing systems. Because again, you could not have democratization if you could not democratize all aspects of public affairs. But the problem is the issue of taxation and the issue of how you spend taxes. They have been historically opaque. And this is the basic logic of government to an extent. The history of governments, both East and West, they collect taxes and they spend it. Who judges whether the spending is wise or not? Certainly not the public. So, but now we again our topic for today would be on open budgeting. So we are trying to bring this historically opaque process closer to ordinary citizens. But then again, the next question is, what would they do about it? So, and again, taxation is a very curious thing, even from a political psychological perspective. The more you pay taxes, I think the more powerless you feel because you don't have any control over it. You don't have any direct control over it, and the benefits themselves are not also direct. So again, that's the curious thing about pooling funds. You don't necessarily benefit from it directly. What about you, Matt? What can you say about the budgeting, especially when you look at your payslip?
I mean, sinabi mo pa. Parang, actually, hindi natin naramdaman yung taxation. You said taxation eh. Because this public thing is basically how the government uses our tax money. And the weird thing about a lot of context is, pag tax, kadalasan sa Amerika, parang naramdaman mo kasi parang file mo pa, you fill up a form, pero dito parang binabawasan ka agad eh. I mean, ito yung sweldo mo, tapos parang bawas ka agad. Oh, and we have among the highest, I think, income tax. And not only that, but sometimes you only feel it with the prices of goods, with the EVAT, value-added tax. And it's like, besides inflation, there's always the growing taxes. So, of course, we would feel mad, because kinukuha pa, binabawasan, tapos parang kung saan-saan ginagamit. So, of course, we have the right to know how our money is being used, by the government. of course, we assume it's to pay for the maintenance of public infrastructures, commuting and all that for a lot of for yung mga sweldo mismo ng gobyernos. But yeah, it's but you also mentioned a bit like, of course, when we know it, we know if it's the right thing to do, and because part of budgeting is, of course, determining and making the decision saan pupunta ang pera at tama ba ang pagpunta ng pera sa mga bagay-bagay. So, and of course, we have a guest that will help us understand, this budgeting, and public and financial transparency as part of a important part of governance and democratic living. So, of course, he is one of our colleagues at the Department of Political Science and Development Studies at De La Salle University, and also a researcher at the La Salle Institute of Governance, and also part of the country's open budget survey team. And he'll talk more about open budget surveys as the interview goes along. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a PI welcome to Ian Jayson Hecita. Welcome, Jayson.
Welcome.
Yeah.
George and Matt, I'm honored to be here. Isa sa mga pinaka-cool na podcast. I even asked my students to listen to you. I don't know, but I don't check
salamat.
I don't know if they're really listening or...
Well, we always appreciate the recommendation, but yeah, thank you for being here, Jayson. So, of course, you heard us talk about the initial issues, but maybe we can ask us though, how does, public budgeting, work? What's the general process? And yeah, what's your experience with the process?
Kasi public budget is, in a way, that's how you materialize societal goals. So the government will say these are our goals. So how do you materialize and make it concrete? It's through the public budget. And so in a way, the budget reflects the aspirations of society. So when you say that for you the important aspiration is to have healthy citizens, then you budget health. If you think that education is an important societal goal, you allocate resources for education. And when you say governance, precisely it's about how you achieve those societal goals. And how do you achieve those societal goals? You translate your the use of power. You translate them into public goods, and you can only translate words like societal goals into actual public services if you put money into it. That's why I think it's essential in a democracy na citizens will have a say or at least know how resources are being utilized. So, ganun naman yun, I don't know, you were right in the intro that maybe 30%, especially I will not say about our university because our university is a good taxpayer, as we know. Anyway,
of course. Animal.
Anyway, so after extracting yung taxation from our income, from sales, yun ang nakikita natin. But in terms of outcomes, do we really enjoy those outcomes, the benefits? Of course, taxation is a form of redistribution, di ba? You're getting wealth from individual economic activities and you redistribute it. So, and then number two, of course, the public has the power of the purse. So when you speak of that, you have it's actually the citizens. The budget is defined by the citizens' wills, theoretically, of course, in a representative democracy, you have you elect representatives to represent your interests, and then supposedly they embody those interests by passing a budget that addresses the citizens' demands and needs. So there are some in the development world, ang pag sinabing governance, ang tinutukoy nila is how the budget, they talk about the budget cycle. When you say governance, ganun tingin nila, and in some literature they call it public financial management or PFM. Yun ang tawag nila. And so yung proseso, it starts with what they call budget planning. So in the budget planning, the government studies the parameters of their fiscal policies. They make economic forecasts. They anticipate the revenue. They outline the government's goals. No? So then papasok yung economic team na nilagay, for example, ni PBBM. So doon, nagpapasok sila ng assumptions about inflation, nagpapasok sila ng assumptions about economic growth. No? So parang there's a board na binubuo ng iba't ibang agency, BBM, BSP, DOF. Kasi yung DOF, siya yung assigned dun sa yung revenue side, no? Revenue. Tapos yung expenditure side, yun yung DBM. So yun, ano? Ngayon, ang question, when you say openness, do we know what happens there? Number two, can the citizens, do citizens do they participate on defining these parameters, these assumptions? So yun, so in part of the budget planning is also asking yung magpo-propose yung agencies, no? Yung mga budget nila, of course yung mga needs nila. Then the DBM formulates a comprehensive budget. They call it the executive's budget proposal. No? So after getting the yung mga proposals from agencies, sila yung magkakat na doon, DBM then. No? Of course, yung tanong na naman doon, may kasali sa agency ba, may kasaling citizens that diba? That can scrutinize or even prioritize. No? So after that, then the executive's budget proposal is presented, of course, dun papasok sa Congress, ano? Yung enactment. Yun, medyo matagal, tsaka yun yung madugo, ano? And as in a democracy, they're supposedly sa Congress, they represent, diba? They represent the people. So, anyway, parang in a representative democracy, yun doon na tayo pumapasok yung boses, ano? Although in some systems, may mga civil society organizations, they can participate in the deliberation. No? For example, in I think New Zealand, may mga open budget, open legislation systems sila. Citizens can actually participate in the deliberation. No?
Yes.
Although kasi, of course, dun sa Congress, alam naman natin dati, di ba, yung dati, no? At dyan nila pinapasok yung gusto nilang project sa district nila, etc.
Yeah.
So, di ba, nauso dati yung Countrywide Development Fund or yung pork barrel. May mga lump sums, no? So,
yes.
Yeah. And then, just right now, no, may dun sa deliberation in Congress, of course, you have the Senate and the House of Representatives. Then, bawat committees, they deliberate on the budget of the agency. Then, after that, they will have a bicameral conference. Then, dun nila ipapasa yung budget. I think, just recently, I think 2 days or 3 days ago, the BICAM committee passed the 2023 budget. It's around 5.268 billion. No?
Sorry, what? 5.6?
5.268 trillion.
5.268 trillion.
Yeah.
Trillion pesos. Wow.
Then, of course, nandun yung confidential. Yung mga confidential funds and intelligence, meron din. Anyway, let's discuss that later. So, yung so after the BICAM, may pinopose sila. I think they're just waiting for the president's signature, approval. So, of course, iba pang usapin yung, of course, you have the president and then politically, of course, in our country, if hawak ng president yung house, di ba? Ano na
okay. So thank you for that overview. And I think I like what you said a while ago na parang power of the purse. In other words, it's that's well, kung pagtagulugan natin, parang puwersa ng pitakan, no? Like, and it's also like the expression, like it's an expression of the dream aspirations of the people. So parang ang mga pangarap ng mga mamamayan ang nasa budget. So like it's something very technical and sometimes even ordinary and mundane, but also very important.
Ano nga,
Yeah?
sino may hawak ng pitakan ng bansa? So,
Pitakan ng bansa, no?
So, sino may hawak?
Yeah. At saka, well, yung binanggit ni Jason, like it involves a lot of people, you know. Of course, it involves the president, the Senate, the congressmen, economists, and budget teams, you know, and it's very technical. And sabi mo naman may citizen participation. So before we go to open budget, you know, I do want to ask, ano ba ang papel ng mga karaniwang mamamayan? Because when you say, of course, budgeting, and especially we're in a representative government, in other words, the people who are elected are presumably represent the interests of the people. You know, they're like, yeah, they're the ones who are doing it on behalf of the people. But are there other citizens that are keep watch? Maybe, may civil society, but maybe you can ask, like, maybe what have they done? Like, how much influence, if ever, do they have in doing feedback or whatever? So do you have any insight on, the role and the citizens in this kind of process?
So just to finish the budget cycle, kasi pwedeng the civil society organizations yung pasok nila. So after the approval, then it becomes a law, General Appropriations Act, and it becomes the basis for government expenditure. The next stage is what they call budget implementation. So dyan papasok yung procurement, bidding, bids and awards. I don't know, but our laws have a mechanism for civil society observers. Of course, the term observer is debated kasi you're just watching something technical or anyway, that's another topic, yung quality of participation ng citizens. And then after the implementation, you'll have the budget accountability or audit. So we have the Commission on Audit, which serves as the supreme, ang tawag ng open budget survey is Supreme Audit Institution. Because si Miriam Santiago pronounces Supreme as Supreme. So anyway, Supreme Audit Institution.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. So yung budget accountability doon papasok. So you have checks and balance internal mechanisms like yung COA to check yung legality and kung tama yung how resources are being used. So when you ask about the role of civil society, there are some spaces for civil society participation, but I would argue here, and even siguro if I try to relate this to the open budget survey, that's why we need transparency. I think civil society, citizens can only engage if they understand, or they have information to use how to engage government. So with regard to, for example, yung implementation,
right?
Bids and awards. We have a procurement law. So sa procurement law na yon, citizens can there should be citizens in the bidding process. And when sabing citizens, they're not may kailangan magpapa-accredit ka and then authorize ka to tapos paper ka rin dun sa parang may observer's guide. So
yun lang pwede, basta sa tabi-tabi lang. Parang halika dito, mag-budget tayo.
Yeah. And then for example, yung Commission on Audit, they have this initiative called Citizens Participatory Audit. Although kasi yung Commission on Audit, ang check lang nila is parang kung if the output matches yung vis-a-vis what's allocated, and if you use the funds in a legal manner, but recently the Commission on Audit, they have partnerships with civil society organizations. They have a mechanism called Citizens Participatory Audit. So they get volunteers to do performance audit, not financial audit, performance audit. Parang what's the impact of this particular project or cost on the actual problem, no? Of course, these are some, I would say, islands of participation.
Yes.
In a way, there are still a lot of things to be institutionalized, no? Especially with regard to citizens' participation, especially on the planning and legislation aspects of the budget. For example, planning and preparation. Are citizens like consulted, or do we just assume that each department they consult their civil society organizations or citizens, no, kung anong ilalagay dun sa budget, no, etc., no, or even in the House of Representatives or maybe in the Senate, do they allow marginalized groups to have a say on ano yung ilalagay dun sa budget, no? So I would argue that there have been initiatives, but marami pang kailangan, and then parang ano kasi, parang islands of various practices, pero hindi pa talaga siya mainstream. At yung katulad kanina, no, you mentioned na we don't know what happened to our taxes, ano. I don't know. For example, in the US, malaking bagay sa kanila if tinatax sila kasi no, baka I don't know, baka it's another topic, you know. We have weak parang consumer rights movement na we don't
And also yung Karen, no? The Karen is like customer service na parang may reklamo, di ba? Like, hey, I want to talk to your manager. Wala tayong ganyan, no? Parang tinitiis lang natin. But I do want to ask though, sino ba yung nagpa-participate sa mga ganyang process? Kasi malamang ang daming nagbabayad ng buwis, pero hindi naman lahat na bawat tao ang sumasali ng ganyan, no? Ako, ni board, nagbabayad naman kami ng buwis, pero parang, yeah, we do have the right to know how, but like, who is doing this on our behalf besides, of course, the senators and congressmen that we voted for and board did not vote for? So, pag ganyan. So sino ba? Sino yung civil society, can you give us some examples of what kinds of citizens that join this, no?
Maybe in respective departments, they have partner civil society organization na engage sa program to some degree. Maybe they provide inputs on what to propose, how much, what are the priorities, etc. No? So I think one of the as far as my observation, yung weakest link kasi is mahina yung linking ng planning dun sa budget, no? When we say plan, we have yung mga midterm plan like the Philippine Development Plan every 6 years. So supposedly the Philippine Development Plan is produced as part of parang it's a strategic plan of the government, but that plan is produced together with the various stakeholders, kasama na yung citizens at civil society organizations. So that should be those are the goals, no? And then supposedly sa budget, you translate those plans into actual material and concrete public services or public goods, no? Yun yung challenge doon. And then that's why we need what we call right now, yung open budgets. Parang kasi when you say open budgets, it is as if yung budgets close siya, di ba? You need the determiner open, ano?
All right.
And actually, the government had made a lot of, since 2012, since we joined what we call the Open Budget Survey, we made a lot of strides of trying to open, making the national budget process more transparent, no? So I mentioned Open Budget Survey. It's a tool used by the International Budget Partnership. It's a think tank based in DC. So they started it in 2000. They started in 2006.
Mhm.
It's the only, I think it's the only in the world's only independent, comparative, and fact-based research instrument. No, so they have
Mhm.
these tools that try
Yes.
to determine the openness of the budget process, national budget
Mhm.
processes all over the world.
Mm.
Um, it's not a perception
Mhm.
survey.
Mm.
Kasi for example, yung corruption perception index, Transparent
Yes.
International, that's perception. Of course, perceptions are also important, no, because
Yes.
you ask the beneficiaries directly, no.
Mhm.
So dito sa open budget survey, what you look at is what we call the supply side of transparency and accountability. What is government actually doing to make
Mm.
their information about public
Mhm.
decisions
Yes.
more open, ano? So ang tatlong mini-measure ng open budget survey
Mm.
is transparency,
Mm.
which of course means accessibility
Mhm.
nung information about the budget, yung timeliness,
Yeah.
and then if the information there is comprehensive, no? Yun yung mini-measure nila, no?
Yeah.
They don't measure like ginagamit ba to ng tao. That's another thing, no, na later I maybe a point for discussion. Then the second na mini-measure nila is what we call public participation, no? To what extent
Mm.
do citizens participate in the
Okay.
actual planning, legislation, implementation, and audit, no? And then last
Mhm.
na mini-measure nila is what we call oversight.
Mm.
To what extent like other institutions curtail the power of the executive to use the budget, ano? So
Mhm.
you have congressional oversight.
Yes.
Nagpa-function ba sila, or may yung for example yung commission on audit, no? Supreme audit
Mhm.
institutions.
All
So
right.
those are the three areas measurement
Mhm.
na ginagamit ng open budget
Mhm.
survey. Around 120 countries
Mhm.
participate in this. No, so the process
Mm.
here is our institute, the LaSalle Institute of Governance,
Yes.
was tapped to do this as a independent like country evaluator
Okay.
in the OBS.
Mhm.
So we answer the questions and we
Mhm.
base the answers on the documents, no, of the
Mhm.
government, no? And then after our answer, there's also a peer reviewer,
Mhm.
international, if they're satisfied or not satisfied
Oh. Okay.
with the answer, no?
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah. Okay. So basically, the open budget survey is like, well, it's a project from a think tank with 120 countries. That's interesting. So it begs the question though, like, so what are your findings, and how did the Philippines do in the open budget survey? Like, are we
Open enough?
good, or are we open enough? See,
interesting,
open
no?
pa.
Interestingly, yeah.
Mm.
Actually, we do well in the transparency aspects,
Mm.
based of course in the survey.
Mm.
In Southeast Asia, we're second to Indonesia, but
Woo!
the last cycle, I think we're number one.
Mm.
Interestingly, our scores in transparency are higher than Japan and even South Korea.
Wow.
Mm.
So no, so that's very interesting, no? And the basis for this is
Mhm.
we have uh, there are 8 key budget documents
Yes.
that we publish, no? And
Mhm.
these are the required documents, at least from the perspective of
Mhm.
Mm.
the survey. So you have the pre-budget statement,
Mhm.
the executive's budget proposal. So all of
Mm.
these are the website. And then you have, when the budget is passed, it's a law, it becomes an enacted budget.
Mhm.
And then ito, no, we have an innovation here. It's called Citizens
Mhm.
Budget. So
Okay.
it's a version of the budget, but in a simpler and less technical version, like a comics or
Mm.
infographics. May ganun na
Mm.
ginagamit yung DBM. Now, I don't know to what extent do citizens or even the academy or teachers or I don't know,
Mhm.
no, NGOs use this, no? But
Mhm.
this is a very helpful. No, naalala ko to during the time the Pinoy administration.
Yeah.
They first had this. It was very helpful. Even the members of Congress appreciated it kasi even in deliberations in the Congress,
Yeah.
they don't even they have a hard time understanding the budget. So ito mas madaling. And then there's also some reports published by the DBM, yung in-year report, media review, year-end report, and then you have of course, the audit report, the COA. No? So all of these documents are found on the websites of the DBM. So when you ask in terms of accessibility, being comprehensive and timeliness, pasok lahat yung documents na yun. But of course, it's another issue kung if there's uptake, anong benefits sa citizen, that's another thing. But the limitation of this tool is that it only measures yung supply side, yung binibigay ng government na space. So that's for transparency. What we are weak at is yung dalawang aspects. Yung public participation. So,
not surprised.
The key issue here is in the budget preparation stage, nakakasali ba yung mga civil society organizations to actually define ano yung priorities, what are the for example, yung amounts, etc. And then another weakness in public participation is in the actual deliberation in Congress. We just leave it to the members of Congress to make the decisions kung ano yung tatanggalin, ano ibabalik. Is there a representation from marginalized groups, IPs, women, to sit down with the members of Congress? So ganun, parang that's one weakness na nakita dun sa survey. Just to give you a perspective, actually the Philippines, 68 yung score, very substantial. Substantial siya kasi 61 yung passing. So just to give you yung global average, for example, in we scored 68. For transparency, we scored 68. Ang global average is 45. So in terms of oversight, I think we scored around 74. In participation, the global average is 14, but we scored 32. Pero bagsak pa rin.
Oh wow, okay.
So across the world, public participation is an issue now.
Yeah. So where's the data collected? Kasi I mean, this is during the Duterte administration or even back to the Pinoy, like maybe
this is the Duterte administration. Actually, just to give you an overview, the survey is done every 2 years. So we started in if you look at it from 2012 up to 2021. Our score in 2012 was 48. That's the Pinoy time.
Bagsak.
During the Pinoy time, nag-increase siya 64, 67.
Oh, okay.
Then during
from Arroyo to Pinoy, from Bagsak to Pasangawa. Sorry.
Then,
anyway,
our highest score was 76 during the time of Duterte. There were important reforms in the bureaucracy. Of course, you have technocrats there who are reform-minded. So sabi nila, as long as you don't touch the war on drugs, you're okay naman. So, mga reform. Anyway. I'm just being
what you were saying?
honest.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. Yeah.
And
then,
then,
Board, you want to say something? Sorry. Kanina kasi Board was trying to say,
No. We attended the Open Budget Survey Open Forum the other week, and the same results were presented. Ang naisip ko lang ay, I think the discrepancy between the results, we are transparent yet there's still limited space for public participation.
Mhm.
This actually reflects the general logic of government. And I think this is the ceiling of how far government can allow participation in such a sensitive yet naturally opaque process. So I think their ceiling is simple. Just we would give you all the information you need, hence high transparency. Would publish as much as we can, pero huwag na kayo makisali. so,
Yeah.
so basically that the power is still, the hands of those who have direct access to public funds. And I think I'll be a bit cynical here and say that yun yung ceiling eh. I think as sabi nga ni Jason kanina, global average is very low. So I think it's a general condition. It's as long as you have governments with direct access to the funds, and as long as funds are not, are pooled into one big pile. Yan eh. So they don't have any incentive to. They have enough incentive to make it transparent. Yun eh. They have enough incentives to make it transparent, and probably disincentives. But to open the decision making process, I think that's a different issue.
Actually, I also, because when we're doing this budget survey, there are some civil society organizations in the Philippines who are very skeptical kasi during the time of the Duterte, di ba? We're increasing in terms of the scores, the metrics. But the argument is in terms of power relations and the kind of political environment, do these scores actually matter? So parang in a way, what you're doing, sabi nung nag-criticize, no, not me, no, sabi nag-criticize, you're actually just legitimizing a regime that technocratically, in terms of the bureaucracy, doing reforms, but it's not translating to overall addressing the asymmetry of power, enabling environment for human rights, etc. No? So may ganun ding tingin, no? But which is also a fair criticism because ang question dito is parang balik tayo no dun sa ano ba, malapit ba sa bituka, no? Politics, parang gano'n. Makakatulong ba to, for example, to improve the lives of the Filipinos, parang gano'n.
Yung sabi ko nga kay Batin, makakain ba yan?
No, but if you like it,
like okay, that means the next question is paano maramdaman yung yung karaniwang Pilipino yung open budget survey, like if ever, what's let's be generous here, no, like what do you think is the impact of the positive scores of the open budget survey for the ordinary Filipino, kung meron man o kung wala?
Theoretically no, meron kasi theoretically if you have an open budget, you can use information to an evidence to demand for something that will actually help. For example, if representing a group that are at the disadvantage, no? So you can use the open budget survey, the transparency of the public documents as an evidence to demand for something. Of course, a lot needs to happen. For example, what we call in transparency is called how do you close the feedback loop. So you know that there's something happening and you have evidence. What's the next step? Do you go to this institution? And then at what cost? No? And then of course you have to hurdle the judicial system if you're thinking about accountability. No? So for example, diba? So babalik ka sa Tulfo. Kay Tulfo yung gusto mo. But no, the idea is if you have transparent budgets, you can use information from those to hold your the duty bearers as what they call the government or duty bearers to hold them accountable and respond to your needs. So the challenge there, of course, is what we call the demand side of transparency. So after knowing that we have these documents, would you be interested to use it? Or you think na, para political efficacy question, wala naman din akong magagawa.
Yeah.
It's costly, I need resources and these people are in power, etc. No? And then, of course, there's also the issue of capacity. Oh, it's there, but you understand what's in there. I think there's a lot of, we need to translate this technical public documents, open data, so more, I think, usable forms or no, ano bang tama ka, no? Ano bang pakialam ng taong bayan diyan, ano? Lalo hindi nila man naiintindihan. If you look at the GAA, di ba? Yung General Appropriations Act, yung mga kapal na, ang hirap masahin, liit ng font, ano? So so yun ang link niya doon sa bituka.
Ang link sa bituka.
Is to supposedly use the evidence to claim something or to push for something.
I mean, because a democracy cannot live on transparency alone, you know. I mean, it's important, yes, but otherwise, kung di mo kaya palitan yung mga kondisyon o, you know, or palitan yung budget, you know, I mean, it's like ninanakawan ka pero kitang-kita mo, di ba? Kitang-kita na, wow, ninanakawan ako.
So,
but no,
to be frank, malayo siya sa bituka.
But, well, no.
Pero nakadikit pa rin. You know, I think that's the, I think it's a very long stick. But it's,
although I think we should.
I think the lesson here is, the lesson here is like, we can use the budget as a tool to advocate for something. No, if you want something to change, something, we use the budget. No? You analyze it, you make a claim, you so in your claim making as a citizen, your basis is the budget, no? No, kasi doon mo makikita yung prioritize, anong ginagawa, no? So
okay. So I mean, let's try to tie it back to, I think, a lot of today's current issues now. I mean, for one thing, what's clear from the open budget survey is like it's transparent, you know, kitang-kita yung budget or the process and like where the money goes, kung saan mapupunta yung budget. But of course, there's a lot of issues like the confidential funds, the Maharlika Sovereign Wealth Fund. So perhaps with the current information we have now, what do you think needs to be done, and maybe connected to the like citizens, like what is said, parang andam, like napaka-technical, but what do you think like what do you think citizens should know in order to participate in the open budgeting, like knowing that the strengths is, of course, openness and transparency, but we're weak in engagement, you know, or in participation. So perhaps what can be done in that area? Anong kailangan malaman ang karaniwang mamamayan para pwede siya makilahok sa open budget survey, or open budgeting process? So
so if the budget documents are there are open and then there are spaces, ang nakita sa research, hindi automatic pumupunta yung citizens to use them. No? So there needs to be what they call an information intermediary or infomediaries to help develop the demand side, no, of transparency and accountability. Demand side is yung uptake of citizens, no? The need to simplify the technical terms, the need to make them understand that it is linked to their welfare. No? For example, every year, no, I also teach this in CityGov. There are some spaces for citizens to actually participate than express their angst online. No? At least at the barangay level, every year they have every year they're required to hold like what they call barangay assembly every year, at least twice. So I try to attend. No? Interestingly, umattend ako. Walang, napupunta senior citizens, and then pinag-uusapan nila yung, for example, yung aso nila pupunang kung saan-saan, mga parking issues. So in a way, that's no? in a way, that's citizenship, ano? But I doubt if our students, for example, know that there are spaces like this to address, I think, yung what bothers them, diba? So there are spaces like this, you know. So the point here is that we need to develop both, ano? Yung supply side, the spaces, and then that's from the government. Then demand side, no, it can be, of course, daming debates din, no? Should the government actually fund civil society participation? Na, for example, kasi there'll be costs, for example, for you to attend a bidding and awards committee. There are costs for you to attend a local development council meeting. Although this, based on the law, citizens can actually go there, but there's an argument na volunteer ka di ba? Of course, there's also the argument naman na baka ma-co-opt ka, no? Co-opted ka naman ng government or may ganong mga debates na moral and ethical, no? So the argument here is that we need to develop both the supply side, the spaces of participation. But mind you, though we score highly on OBS, maraming mga aspects of supply side ng participation at transparency that we need to address fundamentally. Because you have the freedom of information law, which been there in Congress for the past 20 years. Nire-refile lang rin, hindi naman napapasa. I think pag napasa yun, that will unlock a lot of things, but I've heard na ang takot ng mga congressman is yung baka gamitin na for politics. Pero I doubt it because when you say freedom of information, you're just using public data, which is correct data, no? So bakit nila, di ba? Ba't sila matatawa? Anyway, so my point being is ito just to sound ayaw kasi yung whole of society, whole of society approach, no? Parang ganun. But the point is, hindi lang government dapat yung may gagawin, no? But we should also demand the government, but also we can leverage the roles of universities, for example, for example, we have in the local level, we have what we call full disclosure policy. So local governments, they're required to every year, their budgets are posted in places in city halls, municipal halls. Pero nga wala nga nagbabasa, no? Nakadula, nakapost lang. So what, di ba? Parang ganun. So in a way, maybe just an idea, no? So for example, yung mga city gov or maybe community engagement of university students, instead na mag-ROTC, bakit hindi na lang nila tumulong sila doon sa budget, then translate it to infographics or help an NGO understand that these are etc. No? So
actually, kailangan din ng basic accounting skills. I mean, kitang-kita lahat. As minsan kasi, ngayon lang, paglakad ko sa labas ng bahay, meron akong nakitang tarpaulin na nakasabi na multipurpose hall project of the city of Parañaque. Ang kitang-kita na parang, oh, wow, mga ilang milyon na yun. Parang, is that the right price? Is that the right cost for a building, like a simple 2-story building? And I'm like, I think that brings you to another question, no? Na magkano ganyan? Is it rightly priced? So I don't know. I mean, that's another thing to also think about, like ano kailangan natin malaman ng mga karaniwang mamamayan. First, you're saying something? What?
Yeah, Matt, maganda yung sinabi mo. For example, in Abra, they have the concerned citizens of Abra for good government. What they did is, yung mga estudyante ng engineering, civil engineering, so instead na yung community engagement nila, they assessed yung mga road projects if pumapasok sa standards. So rather than yung mga tree planting, cleaning, of course they have their own benefits, no? So ganun. Ang ginawa nila, they did this citizen social accountability project na related pa rin sa civil engineering. So they partnered with COA, tapos pinapunta sila ng COA dun sa mga road projects to assess. Yun, no? Tapos nagbigay sila ng findings and may mga nakasuhan na DPWH officials. So that's one practice, no? Na pwede pwedeng ipasok yung paggamit ng public documents, maybe in community engagement or even how we teach, for example, at least sa field natin, ano, yung city gov or maraming pwedeng I mean, kailangan din from our end pag-isipan ano yung pwedeng use
Yeah.
ng public data. It's not necessarily naman at looking at the yung fault finding, ano, hindi naman pwedeng it can also help identify ano yung problems, no? Hindi pala pinopondahan to kaya hindi successful yung isang program. Pwedeng gano'n, ano, nakita natin gano'n.
Yeah.
So yun, ano?
Yeah.
I think
I mean,
the primary challenge for encouraging ordinary citizens, kasi may mentality tayo na ano trabaho na nila yan. So
mas marunong ka ba sa kay mayor o di ba?
Yung mga ganun So I think that's also one mindset that we can break. And I'm not putting my pin I'm not pinning any hope on the older generation. Hindi na sila babago. But I think for the youth, for younger citizens, they should rid themselves of such such a disposition na trabaho nila yun ba't pa tayo makikailam. So I think that's
in a way, Borch, it's the same with yung what we do in the Participate project. Right?
Yeah.
So bakit bumoboto tayo pero after that we don't care about the budget, we don't care about, diba? So parang our concept of democracy is yung parang it ends and dies. It starts and dies with the election.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. I mean, the findings that you found are from the previous administration. Perhaps maybe you can tell us on maybe what do you think of the current administration? Are you similarly hopeful that manatiling mataas ang score natin, or are the current issues the current issues affect that? Like, what do you think? Is it hope? Can we be hopeful that our score can be improved?
Anong preliminary diagnosis niya?
Yeah.
Actually, because we engage with the bureaucracy. Interestingly, I don't know. Of course, we can attribute to the PBBM is open to reviving some of the governance reforms during the time of Pinoy that were effective. No, pero this is just I just say, there's rumors that there are rumors na they're going to revive the bottom-up budgeting. Like in the bottom-up budgeting kasi what they do is the civil society organizations at the local level, they define the problem and they will identify the project, and those projects will be funded by a specific budget allocation. So that program during the time of Pinoy was really appreciated by the people on the ground, because they were able to allocate funds for specific projects like irrigation, like water sources, like evacuation centers na the communities were the ones who defined. And then they find the project. Walang magagawa si mayor, pipirma lang siya. But gusto yun ang gusto sa city. And there are rumors that this administration will revive that. Number two, we're still a member of what we call Open Government Partnership. And the current administration, I think, will release an executive order. That's why I'm here, no? Yun ang pag-uusapan. They will release an executive order to institutionalize that. The Open Government Partnership is an international organization of countries. Ang nangyayari doon, if you're a member, you will commit programs and projects on transparency, accountability, and use of technology. Then when you commit those, you have to implement those kasi may international evaluator. Then they will give you a rating. So from that time we joined 2011, founding member tayo hanggang ngayon. Member pa rin tayo. And in this administration, at least from the Department of Budget Management, they would like to strengthen our participation by issuing an executive order, kasi mapipilitan pag may EOC president, mapipilitan yung agencies na mag-commit ng programs on transparency and accountability, no? So from I think this is maybe from from pol sci, no? Political science.
Yeah.
Not necessarily from the open budget survey, no? Or kasi 'di ba historically you have the Marcoses, no? May reputation sila, yung family, no? Baka in a way they're pressured to make this mga reforms
Yes.
na para lang no, mawala yung reputation na yun,
To prove
or
the wrong, yeah.
yeah. And then I have a friend who's a faculty abroad. Sabi niya, what if mali kayo, no? Baka 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 mag-succeed siya. Di ba? I don't know, no? So maybe pero I don't know, no? I know some people in government na mga reform-minded nandito rin, ano.
Yeah.
No, that's the thing. Siguro imbitan ka namin paglumutang uli yung issue na yun regarding bottom-up budgeting. But tangential comments, since nabanggit naman na ni I would not be surprised, but I would still be cynical. It's not about them, it's not primarily about them rehabilitating the reputation or whatnot, or doing something really good. But I think this is a new development in how authoritarianism may work here in the Philippines. Because as long as you keep your hand on crucial political issues na you can say untouchable, for example, the martial law legacy, Marcos's legacy, political freedoms, anti-communist sentiments, you siguro you can preserve that as untouchable issues, but you can leave everything else to reform. That doesn't make your regime more democratic. And that also gives the national government a way of keeping local government on their toes. Because the national government can actually pressure local governments via CSOs. There are studies showing that civil society organizations in the Philippines, not only are they less political per se, but they can be easily co-opted. So I would not be surprised if papasa tong bottom-up budget as a means for Marcos to concentrate more power. So, and this is a very sophisticated mode of centralizing power. The traditional rhetoric of Marcos dictador would no longer resonate. So how can you call it a dictator kung may bottom-up budgeting?
So, Sama naman yung mga
growing sophistication. Growing sophistication and such.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying here is that meron ding reform minded officials in government, no. Of course we're just barely 5 months, 6 months, it's let's see, but interesting rin sinabi ni Borge, it's a way to legitimize so that the more fundamental issues are not asked anymore,
Illiberalism, authoritarianism, they're not mutually exclusive with reform. I think we need to remind ourselves of that. Reform is not mutually exclusive with authoritarianism.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so I think this is a good time maybe to try and start wrapping up. But I think the last question very important would be, of course, based on your findings. Maybe gusto mo ihalo yung maybe your own diagnosis, maybe knowing what we know from your findings and from the current conditions of the regime and the Philippine politics, what then needs to be done, like what recommendations can you make in order to, in a way, maximize the transparency, but also besides transparency, it's connected to so many things. Like besides, like when we talk about citizenship and governance, there's also accountability, there's also effectiveness, rule of law. It's related to all the other kinds of things. But how can we maybe use it to fight corruption? Because that's that's one of the concerns. Yeah.
Wait. May dagdag lang sa tanong ni Matt. Just to up the ante lang. Kasi again, this is a problem of spreading your butter too thinly, which is a common policy problem. So dagdag ko lang sa tanong ni Matt. What should we prioritize in promoting the budget?
Good, no? So the lesson here in the open budget survey is that there have been steps, at least at the level of the bureaucracy, to open up the spaces. While there are spaces, these spaces are not fully optimized because there's a lot of what I call demand side issues. But again, it can be argued that these present spaces, public documents, open budgets may not be enough to actually overhaul the system. There needs to be a bigger reform effort. Of course, you have the freedom of information, a law that will protect citizens and enable citizens to seek government documents and, of course, punish officials who will not disclose documents. And then there are also reforms related to questions na political, no? Because it's hard to in terms of governance, this is good news, yung open budget survey. But it's hard to me, it's hard to delineate yung governance and politics. Politics being the asymmetry of power between the elite and the citizens. So, so to address that, another fundamental issue, I think, to me, not necessarily the opinion of the institute, no?
Yes.
The yung political dynasty. No? So that's another reform area that kailangan tingnan. But it will it's a big reform that will require changing the constitution. No? That could be messy or I don't know. No? So, so there are strides in the bureaucracy. There are strides in government and governance. But there should should be bigger strides institutionally at the political level. But of course, we vote and then we just wait for the next election. I don't know, no? To what extent can we demand something bigger? But this open budget survey, I think, results indicate that there are important reform-minded stakeholders, not only from government, also in civil society, working to actually improve the current system that we have, because we think that it's hard to change the system. So we just work within the system and maximize whatever we can maximize.
Okay. How about you, Bart? What do you think out of what Jason has shared with us today?
Yeah, I think again, the problem is still multidimensional. Priority, I think the demand side for the time being, kasi maayos naman yung supply side. Again, the priorities change. So kung magkaroon ng 5-year plan siguro, or for this administration, then can focus on one, then focus on the other. Pero mas masakit kasi yung demand side eh.
Yeah, actually, I did it well. I learned a lot from Jason today, and of course, the Open Budget Forum. That there's actually the results tell me that there is a lot of potential for again participation. You know, the information is there. You know, the quote unquote institutional willingness to be transparent is there. You know, and surprisingly, the current administration is quite willing. You know, and there is reason to be optimistic, but in terms of like popularizing and mainstreaming it for citizens, you know, kanina pa ako iniisip kung paano pwede i-simplify, you know, na parang citizen budgeting. Maybe it's being done already, you know, I don't know, but it's good if you can. The first questions that I'd ask is, number one, magkano ba yan ang gastos? Is this enough, you know, or is it too much? I think these are simple questions that we ask every day, because in a way, I don't know, like budgeting is like an instinct to Filipinos. Eh. Pag bago bumili ng lunch mo, di ba, parang masyado ba itong mahal o hindi? O bago pagbigyan ng baon sa mga anak mo, di ba, parang is this too big? Is it too small? Malulugi ba ako kapag ganito ang gastos ko or something? It's even then with the further, you know, like into the future planning, you know. So is this in relation to each other? Like, should I spend more on education or more on health or more on mga sweldo ng mga ng civil servants? So I think if we maybe if we can create like a questionnaire or a test kit for citizens, like in their own words, sapat na ba ito or something, or kulang pa ba, di ba? Because these are questions that Filipinos ask every day, and if we can in a way use these questions to train them to look at, starting from the barangay level maybe and up to the local government and then maybe national, kasi national milyon at trilyon billion ang halaga, so baka nakakanganga yung laki ng pera. So it's difficult to think about, but I think in terms of like the practicing from moving up, scaling up from barangay to local government to national might be the next step. But we should also use the instinct that nandyan na sa Pilipino. Like if you've gone to Christmas shopping, na parang, ilan ba kailangan kong how much do we need? How much do we need to buy? Is it too expensive? Masyado ba mahal? Or is that cheap? Is it too cheap? Masisira ba ito kagad? Kung bibiliin ko to, gagamitin ko to. So budgeting has a lot of questions. It sounds boring, but yeah, it's something that we do every day. Malakas ang hugot ko dito kasi parang nagbibili ako ng Christmas choo-choo or like Noche Buena and all that, and gifts and all that. So it can be very engaging. But if we can practice it, that'll be interesting. So yeah, Borge, anything to say before we wrap this up? Yeah.
Yeah, I think madaling salita, there's still a disjunction between endemic practices in household budgeting and how government does that. But then again, these are driven by two different logics. So I would like to pin down again what I've mentioned earlier on, which is, again, the logic of government is still distinct. And like it or not, the logic of government right now, concentration of power and wealth, it is not really conducive. So the challenge is, how can we force the government to open up and to make spaces?
Yes.
So I think that's the challenge for not only open budget survey and not only for open budgeting, but for democratizing public economics or the public purse. So malaking assumption is a big assumption to say that representatives embody the people or the citizens in budget. It's a big assumption, and the presence of open
they're
budgeting,
supposed to, yeah.
it's a big supposed to. So we could no longer afford to simply assume it. But yeah, yun ang dyan eh. So it's still a long way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Jason, any message for our listeners as someone who also, who is an active citizen and who also teaches citizenship and governance, any message to fellow citizens, mga kapwang mamamayan?
So there's a reason to be optimistic. I think, Matt, you're right. No? Budgeting is a very sensitive topic to Filipinos because they can relate. But in terms of the national budget, we need to, in a way, link it to our, for example, everyday needs. There's one group, Move as One Coalition. So ang ginagawa nila ngayon, they're into inclusive mobility. So aside from documented about how bad our public transport, they also analyze the budget for budget transpo, and they're using it as a way to advocate for changes. And changes na ina-advocate nila is for certain allocations for specific projects that will improve public transpo. So maybe the key here to develop the demand side is to actually be creative on how what we call budget communications, how we communicate these issues to the everyday lives of Filipinos. So earlier I told you that I think the academy like us will have an important role to play. In my City Gov class, I asked my students to request a document from the FOI portal of the national government, and then document their experience, how long, what did they ask, etc. So the point being is that this is what we call everyday democracy.
Yes.
So this is democracy after elections, no? After and before elections. So 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 if you don't like the president, there are still spaces where
Yes.
you can uh where you can ventilate your
Yes.
interests. So uh let's optimize the current spaces. Of course, we also need to demand for bigger reforms, but uh, we should use the spaces. We should use this the current open data to improve our lives, and for us to be able to fully use it, we also need to collaborate as citizens. So universities, you have civil society working with universities, and then activating the word activating, no, activating
Yeah.
the students to actually participate in governance using this open data and basis.
Okay. So that's a very good discussion on something that is very important, very mundane, but like again, with a lot of potential, and very important research with regards to the open budget survey and how our country fares and how it can do better and how it relates to very important issues of the day. So thank you very much, Jason, for that. Now, let's, as usual, we move on to our last segment, which is recommendations, where we talk about related material on, let's see, maybe books, movies, videos, or activities that might help us understand the topic better. So, Jason, do you have any recommendations for our listeners if they want to learn more about our topic?
Maybe they can just search on YouTube the case of Porto Alegre in Brazil.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where they're doing participatory budget. So it's basically a local budget system like the bottom-up budgeting. So it's the citizens who actually define the priorities and with what amounts. And there have been a lot of studies that it has a direct link to the bituka because there's been improvement in welfare, and it's correlated with the system of participatory budgeting. That's a good model to study. No? So if there's a lot of videos on that in YouTube, and there's a lot of materials that you can find online.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Borge, any recommendations for our listeners?
I think naging reading topic ko yung Porto Alegre nung participation and development course ko ng MBA. So yan, po tinalala ko. For my case, I would recommend two documentaries. Again, I started off with the issue of taxation, and again, we still go back to taxation. Budgeting is still part of the system of taxation. It is called spending taxes. But for this episode, I recommend two documentaries. The first one would be Panic, the Untold Story of the 2008 Financial Crisis. So it basically breaks down not only the crisis itself, but I would like to emphasize how the bailout was provided. So the politics behind the negotiations, behind the bailout. This is something inside this documentary. So again, we have multiple documentaries on the 2008 financial crisis, many of which focused on the implications on ordinary Americans. But this one focuses more on the elites. How the hell did they handle the public purse? Kung bakit ganun kalaki yung bailout? And why was the bailout actually brought up in the first place? So that's one. The other is, I think, a two-part series by Deutsche Welle. Titled is Can't Pay, Won't Pay. So this is the history
Can't pay, won't pay. Yeah.
This is the history of the politics of taxation in Europe. In the West, to be more specific. So again, taxation. And what's Pilipinas? Well, we don't have that. We don't have such violent conflicts on taxation. So again, we go back to our old mentality of that. But in the West, the development of states in the West, as well as democratization, was in part founded on issues of taxation. I mean, the American Revolution itself, the American War of Independence, was triggered by taxation without representation. So yeah, that's one thing. So yeah, two documentaries on taxation just to complete the picture of budgeting.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know. I think my recommendations next are a bit more mundane in comparison. So those are very informative and educational. But I have two Christmas films to recommend, just to maybe balance your holidays out. Besides, of course, with uh, studying and budgeting, But the first recommendation I have is a Filipino film called Ang Tanging Ina Niyong Lahat, starring Ay de las Alas, directed by Wendy Doramas. And it's funny because this is the one where it's the third in a series where Ai is a mother of, let's say, children of family of 12 children, suddenly becomes the president of the Philippines. So there are a lot of movies like that in the United States. So it's the Philippine version of that. And of course, there's some political commentary there, but it's of course just nice to, a movie to relax to and always want to revisit Ay de las Alas movies, and yeah, it's a comedy. And the other one is Jingle All the Way, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, which again is one of my favorite Christmas films. It's about a father who's trying to get a coveted Turbo Man action figure for his son, and it's of course always sold out. So it's basically him running towards the malls about shopping, and it's definitely emblematic of shopping kahit hanggang ngayon para daming pila, parang pandemic lang, but yeah, punong-puno na yung mga malls for shopping, and nauubusan na yung mga regalo. So it's very relatable, and it's in the 90s, but I think there's still something that's timeless about it. So yeah, that's it for our Christmas episode. So yeah, thank you very much, guys, for the very hearty discussion, very relatable subject of budgeting and the open budget survey. So Jayson, is there anything you want to promote if people want to look more at your research? Where can they find you or your work?
Just visit the LaSalle Institute of Governance website and the LaSalle Institute of Governance Facebook account. So most probably our knowledge products and our knowledge activities are there. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
Sige. We'll attach a link.
We also have papers there. Yeah. 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 Anyway, so thank you. Ay, oo nga. Ako rin, shit. No papers, yes. Okay, so that's it. I think I will see you all next year at 2023. So you can find all our episodes. So we have had a full year of episodes. So please check us out at YouTube, Spotify, and Anchor. And of course, follow us on our Facebook podcast page. But of course, if you want to have a topic featured, have comments, questions, clarifications, you may send us an email at pipodcastph@gmail.com. But until the next episode,
magandang gabi, mga ka-PI.